Hey cousins, welcome to Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Welcome, cousins, to this episode of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. I'm your host, Cornell Wright, the People's Lobbyist. Join me for a quick one, and we're going to talk about gaps. Interesting gaps. So, cousins, keep wearing your face mask, right? And you know, I was out the other day and I saw something that made sense to me in regards to this whole COVID thing. I live in the Northeast, and it gets cold here every now and then. Not as cold as it should have been, but it's getting colder. And I noticed that as I exhaled, I saw all of my exhale come out, right? I coughed, and I saw that come out. As I was just breathing, I saw it coming out of my nose. Cousins, that's a visible, tangible understanding of how COVID gets transmitted. So remember, cousins, they talk about keeping social distancing for 6 feet? Think about that next time you're walking, for those of you living in the Northeast. And some of you cousins in the South and Southwest, I know you don't understand this cold thing, but watch it on TV. Or even better, watch some of your football teams when they're playing in the cold environments and see the air particles coming from the guys who are playing. And see how they're all commingling. And that's the reason why the NFL and the other schools and those kind of things, there's a visible way to identify how COVID could be transferred. You with me, cousins? Keep that one in mind. So, we're into 2022, and here's the 2022, right? Recognize 2022 is not the only way to keep track of time and the years, but let's go with that one because it works for a lot of people. So one of the things we're going to have coming up in 2022 is there's going to be a major election, in the sense of every member of the House of Representatives is going to be changed and turned over. They serve 2-year terms. Also, 34 in 2022 of the 100 senators are going to be turned over, i.e., coming to us and ask us to rehire them or to hire them initially. You got that, cousins? We hire them to do our work for us. Keep that in mind, cousins. It's not a popularity contest. It's who's going to go and do the right job for you. Okay? And so within that, there are going to be 34 of the 100 senators that come up for election this year. So we're going to have to be paying attention to election activities and those kind of things, find out what the election laws are in your state, find out where you're voting, start exercising, getting ready for those muscles. And also recognize, cousins, that all of these candidates and the other state candidates in your area are going to be coming to you, asking you for your vote to hire them to do a job, which is that job is to represent you in creating legislation which is based upon policies that they like or that you want to tell them to bring forth in order to what? Help your life be better and help the United States of America become stronger. You got that, cousins? It's as simple as that. That's why your vote matters. That's why your vote counts. So let me offer a couple ideas in regards to, in fact, I want to look at 7 things as to what might be some of the things we would want to have our elected officials pay attention to. And by paying attention to, I mean start to implement policies and legislations and budgets, which is really key because if there's no money, nothing happens, right? Budgets to make things happen differently in our country. The first one is let's talk about gaps. Now, a gap is a way of looking at this is what you expect and this is what you're receiving, all right? The gap can also be you can run this fast and I can run that fast and here's the gap. It could be a weight category since we're all in the new year and maybe some of you are thinking about losing a little weight. This is the weight you want. This is the weight that you are. That's the gap we need to try to figure out, cutting back on, calories, right? Anyway, cousins, that's a good one. But so let's talk about gaps. One of the gaps that we have to continue taking a look at is that of income gap. All right? So cousins, we have cousins in the United States who are truly billionaires. I don't quite understand how they made all the money or whether it's worth all the money, etc. But good for them. On the other side, cousins, we got cousins who are what? working for $7, $8 an hour. That's called an income gap, cousins. Somebody's making $7, $8 an hour, and you got somebody else making billions. So at one point in time, I had a class, and I said, so here's a class in which you have a CEO of an organization, pick one, he or she were making, pick a number for a CEO, $10 million a year. And so I asked them, I said, so that's $10 million a year of someone who has skills, has capabilities, etc., has degrees, has been working hard, and is smart. But if that were the case, cousins, and we want to really talk about efficiency, couldn't you hire 3 people and give them $3 million a year and have them work 24 hours a day? I'm just saying, cousins. People talk about income gaps. Well, maybe there's some things we ought to consider regarding that. Because part of the income gap question is one of taxation. Who gets taxed on what items and whether that is still necessary or appropriate. So keep that one in mind. The other question is, cousins, is education gap. The education gap is amazing. It's within your same state, you can have students achieving at very high levels and students achieving at very low levels within the same state, which theoretically is working on the same processes. Within those states, cousins, you can have states with relatively high achievement and other states with low achievement. I would submit to you, cousins, that in this world, we need to have almost no educational gaps, okay? Because everybody needs to be educationally prepared in order to, one, participate in our economy, and participate in our society, and to be able to be one of the troopers that we have, executing what we want to do. What we want to do intellectually, what we do politically, what we do militarily, we need to have everybody have that capabilities. And the narrower that range would be on the high end, isn't that the better off we'd be? Absolutely, cousins. So we got to work on that education gap. There's an equity gap. We've talked about in past programs about the equity gap on all sorts of areas of equity. All right? Theoretically, we the people doesn't describe any equities. Okay? The Declaration of Independence is that it talks about equity for all. All men are created equal, and he meant men as well. Now at the time, but we've changed that. So if that is true, then why is there an equity gap? Unless it's a conscious decision that people have made because of laws, because of socialization, because of consumer behavior concepts being applied to maintain separation and maintain a gap that's no longer appropriate or necessary. Because, cousins, we need everybody in the game. You've heard about the digital divide, which is a major gap. It reared its head in an ugly way in 2020, when so many students had to go home because the schools were too dangerous because of COVID. And we started finding out there were communications deficits in some parts of the country. There were terminal deficits. Some kids didn't have the computers. Other kids did. So if you had enough money, you could go buy a kid a brand new computer, blah, blah, blah. They're up and running and they have a nice space to work with. If you were living in a different environment, perhaps you didn't have the money to go buy a new computer. Perhaps you didn't have the capability of having access. And now, as we know, we've heard about teachers and students having to go park in parking lots around those establishments that had Wi-Fi so they could conduct their classes and take their education. Cousins, that's wrong. You recognize, cousins, we're talking about 5G now coming to the United States. It has already been installed and implemented in other countries. We're not leading in regards to our technological capabilities, for that communication pattern. A lot of other countries have more advanced capabilities than we do. But what does that mean for all of us having access to the information that we need in order to make good decisions, in order to live our lives, and nowadays, in order to actually apply for applications of stuff? I've actually applied for my COVID testing online. What happens if I didn't have an online capability? Guess I'd go to my public health department, stand in line, wait around. Time is valuable to everybody, isn't it? So as a result, the digital divide is one of those gaps we have to work on. The other gap that you don't hear talked about very often, cousins, is how about a justice gap? Okay? Do you believe that if you had a certain ethnicity, a certain sexuality, and a certain amount of money, that you could get different justice in America? Of course you know that's true. All right? So when does justice, as you see in all the front of the courtrooms with the balance, when is justice truly blind? I have an attorney friend of mine who hope to get on the show sometime. He said, you're a fool if you go into a courthouse without an attorney. All right? I mean, think about when you see it on TV, how it plays out. That somebody gets caught with X amount of product, that's supposedly contraband or inappropriate, and they come up with $50,000 worth of bond, $50,000 bail, and they're out on $5,000. Somebody else who doesn't look like them with a same amount of product ends up with $500,000. Is that justice, cousins? No. Because justice needs to be equitable. It's supposed to be balanced. It's supposed to be fair. It's supposed to be the same. As we're starting to see now, think about it, cousins, there was even a discussion being made in which the rioters of January 6th, who were trying to overthrow our Constitution, they were claiming that was equivalent to the rioters in Portland who were throwing firebombs at the courthouse. Think about that. Firebombs against the courthouse, never breached or got inside the courthouse, versus going inside our nation's capital and ending up with people being killed, being equal. No, cousins, that's not justice. The other thing is, cousins, think about it. We got COVID, right? COVID is out there, and COVID has just started to expose the health disparities that we have in this country. All right? Not only from health, or are you healthy, are you healthier or not, but just basically your access to health and what it means for you. There was a study done a couple years ago. I don't have the reference, so hopefully somebody will help me with that going forward. But it looked at the health of the United States versus Great Britain. They took out racial pieces, so they looked at white cousins on both sides in order to make sure there wasn't any issues about racial differences, etc. And they were comparing upper class, middle class, and lower class peoples. And they were saying, okay, they thought that there would be pretty much a parallel, that the rich on the upper class on each side would be healthy, the middle class would be healthy, and the lower class would be healthy. What they found instead is that the lower class in Great Britain was healthier than the lower class in the United States, than the upper class in the United States. You got me on that? Lower class in Great Britain was healthier than upper class in the United States. So that's just a start. Then you start looking at the access to care, the cost of care, the availability of care, how much medications are costing, etc., and the fact that we're still trying to get universal health care within the United States, which aggravates because no one can justify, if you will look at it, why the United States of America is the number one cost in the world. We spend more money in the world than anybody else on our health care, and we're like number 25 in regards to outcomes. Cousins, and then so that means we still have disparities within with our group of cousins. That goes back to who's capable of being put on the field in order to be able to produce, to be a contributing member of the society, right? So, and then finally, cousins, let me call out one that's perhaps you haven't thought about before, and that is a critical thinking gap. Now, critical thinking is you look at something and you start making evaluations based upon what you know, what you've learned, what you've been exposed to, a process of analyzing information, a process of looking at it. Attorneys are trained to be critical thinkers. Engineers are trained to be critical thinkers. Accountants are trained to be critical thinkers. Doctors are trained to be critical thinkers in regards to what's the process of which you analyze and start looking at information. That's not to say that certain people can't be bamboozled or fooled on occasion, but what it does say, it gives us all a chance to start with a basic understanding of fact and knowledge and then start to progress through that to come through a better decision based upon critical thinking. That goes back to education. So if we got better with our critical thinking, cousins, then we'd be able to make more decisions that are what? Not only based upon the fact, but also then what truly is better for you, not just because it's something that you feel good about today. You follow me, cousins? Critical thinking will help us all make better decisions. It will start to bring us together because we now will start working with and understanding and debating concepts and facts as opposed to, I don't like the fact that you have on a red shirt today and you have on a blue shirt. That's inconsequential, isn't it, cousins? No. Red versus blue? No. This is the United States, and we're trying to focus on we the people, so the better we can work on that, the better we are. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, I believe, said that democracy requires a more educated electorate. So we know more about what's being told to us, we can process and make better decisions going forward. So critical thinking gap. So cousins, as they start coming around, i.e. the elected officials asking for your vote, asking you to hire them, think about their positions on the income gap, education gap, equity gap, justice gap, health disparities gap, and critical thinking in our country. So cousins, thank you for joining me today. Keep wearing your mask. And if you have any ideas about other gaps, put those on the comment side of Bad Liquor and Bad Ideas, and we'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves.
We are the people. We are the people.
Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas is intended for the participation of responsible adults of legal drinking age who wish to engage in substantive virtual discussions and social drinking for entertainment purposes only. Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas does not advocate the abuse of alcoholic beverages. Choosing to participate in any of the drinking activities shared in the program should be made with moderation and caution and is the sole responsibility of the user.